alone, my pet?
Whoa. Who are you?
I'm just a harmless old peddler woman.
Uh, no thanks, I already know Jesus.
No, I'm here to offer you a delicious apple. A fair apple for one fairer face.
Uh-huh. Well, see, here's the thing. I've kind of seen Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Like, a lot. So, I think I'm gonna pass.
Now listen here, Sonny. I'm one of the most respected Disney villains there are, and I'll not be mocked by your little...
Okay, I'll take the apple. I've been trying to find a use for my English degree anyways. Mind if I talk about the symbolism?
This better not be slander.
No, purely pro-evil queens and poison apples. I promise.
Poison? Who says anything about poison?
Let's get started.
The poison apple in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is one of the most well-known pieces of fairy tale iconography. When you think of the Snow White fairy tale, probably the first image that comes to mind is something like this, or even this. And for pretty good reason. The imagery of the girl holding a luscious red apple before falling into a death-like sleep is evocative visual storytelling at its best. Yet the whole apple thing wasn't even the evil queen's first murder attempt in the original fairy tale. She also tried with a poisoned comb and a too-tight lace before ultimately bringing out the apple. Yet the comb and the lace kind of end up being forgotten and disposable, not just because most adaptations omit them, but because the apple itself is so iconic that it kind of just overshadows the others. It's kind of like how nobody remembers the names of the other cheetah girls besides Raven. Sorry, they don't. But I guess the question worth asking is why? Why was the apple the most iconic thing in the whole story? Why an apple in the first place? Why not a pear or an orange or, I don't know, a chocolate chip cookie or something? Well, first of all, fruit of all kinds is a symbol of life and fertility. So having a symbol of life used as an instrument of death creates an interesting juxtaposition. Something that should brings life brings death. In addition, fruit is also very intricately tied to Western ideas of sexuality, and more specifically women. Fruit is part of the process by which plants reproduce. And I'm not going to go too deep into this because it's a family show, but something juicy and tempting, fertility, yeah.
How to get this savior to taste my forbidden fruit.
And given how Western society has always been kind of prudish about anything sexual, an apple being used as an instrument of bad things is kind of par for the course. Then, of course, there's a more straightforward reason. Apples, or at least the ones in the Snow White movies, are bright red. Red is a color draws your eye, makes you think of blood, calls back to the whole
bring back her heart in this
thing. Yet Snow White did not invent the whole concept of an apple being given to herald some catastrophe. To get that answer, we'll have to go back in time, back before we got a bajillion live-action Snow Whites, back before Disney, back before the Brothers Grimm collected and modified stories, back before the fall of Rome, all the way back to Greek mythology and the Trojan War. Helen may have been the face who launched 1,000 ships, but the whole mess actually started with Eris, the goddess of discord, who was pretty peeved at not being invited to a celebration where the other gods were in attendance, which should remind you all of another fairy tale. Ahem and ahem and ahem and ahem. So Eris rolled a golden apple with the words, "For the fairest," carved into a crowd of dancing goddesses. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite all, of course, stake a claim to the apple since they all believe that they are the fairest. An apple for the fairest.
It's almost as if there's allusions to Greek mythology peppered all across Western culture.
But of course that's not the whole picture. So let's go back maybe even a bit farther, all the way back to the book of Genesis. And probably everyone watching it knows the story. God says, don't eat from this one tree. Eve is like, tra-la-la-la-la, no. And the snaky snake convinced her to eat the fruit, and they all get banished from the Garden of Eden. Bing, bang, boom. But wait! My friends who've studied the Bible will say, that fruit wasn't necessarily an apple. It's just fruit from the tree of knowledge, not necessarily any fruit that we non-Edeners know. To which I say, yeah, true, but the interpretation of the fruit as being an apple, or at least apple-like, is pretty prominent in Western civilization. And I'd argue that whether or not it's completely accurate, it's still a big part of why apples hold the reputation that they do in Western storytelling tradition. So poor innocent Eve gets tricked by the serpent into eating an apple that inflicts a terrible curse. Parallels are pretty striking there as well. But they're taken a bit further in the New Testament. See, in the book of Genesis, it's just a tricky serpent who gets Eve to go try that apple, girlfriend. But the Book of Revelation reveals...
It's the devil!
So, Christian tradition, by and large, the environment that the Snow White fairy tale was born into, has this cursed fruit given by an evil being disguised as something relatively harmless. So we have two of the foundational stories of Western civilization bearing striking parallels to the Snow White story, most particularly as it pertains to that all-important apple scene. And I'd argue that's why the whole poison apple thing is so evocative. Because even if you don't know the story about Eris and the goddesses or the story of Eve and the Tree of Knowledge, the ideas and symbols from these stories are baked into the delicious apple pie of storytelling that we're all ushered into. And because of that, on some level, the whole concept of magical poison apples just makes intuitive sense.
What do you think, poison apples grow on trees?
That's why, next Halloween, maybe skip the bobbing for apples.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this new territory. If so, maybe I'll make it a series. If not, then well, we never have to speak of it again. Be sure to like and subscribe and share this video with your friends, your enemies, and social media followers. Speaking of, follow me on Twitter if you want front row receipts to me slowly losing my faith in humanity, my Tumblr for all of my ridiculous fandom stuff, and if you want to donate to my Patreon, any little bit is appreciated. Links to all three are in the description. Hope you guys have a great day. Bye.